And welcome to our Books and Beyond event. I'm your host, Pinky Shah, to get tonight's event started with my co-host, Sabina. We have question and answer session planned for later, so feel free to raise your hand or type your question in the chat and we'll gladly ask it for you. Just as a reminder, we'll be recording tonight's event. So tonight we'll be talking to Anna Johnston. Her debut novel, The Bored Life of Frederick, Fife, marked an exciting entry into the literary world and has touched readers with its humor, heart, and insight into aging and identity. Anna resides in Melbourne, Australia with her family. Thank you so much, Anna, and welcome. Thank you for joining us from the other side of the world.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
No, thank you. We are very excited. But before we actually dive into our conversation, would you do us an honor and maybe read a small paragraph from your book?
Certainly. I normally just read the start of the book so that if anyone hasn't finished reading, I don't give anything away.
Sure, sure.
The single drop of pee made a pitiful splash. Fred sighed as he stood over the cracked toilet bowl that, like him, had seen better days. The public restrooms at Wattle River Reserve weren't as dirty as he feared, though the walls hosted a colourful array of ageing graffiti. Another couple of measly drips. Was there a job in the armed forces for people who could urinate in Morse code? If so, he'd be an ideal candidate, though it was unlikely they'd accept 82-year-olds. He glanced around the cubicle for something to distract his prostate. A watched pot never boils, after all. He didn't want to call Kaz for a good time, as some peeling purple writing on the windowsill suggested, and he was getting nowhere, so he zipped up and unlocked the stall door. The damp concrete toilet block was pretty roomy. Could he possibly sleep here tonight? Surely if he asked around, he could find somewhere a tad cosier that didn't smell like urinal cakes and lost dreams. His knobbly fingers protested as he rinsed them under the freezing tap water. The dryer was broken, so he made the most of his wet hands to smooth out his unruly mustache. A foggy mirror above the sink reflected blue eyes flanked by deep crow's feet. Not a bad price to pay for 8 decades of laughter. Well, 7 decades at least. Fred coughed. Grief's blunt force could still wind him on bad days. He shook it off and headed back outside to the river, where he'd come to clear his mind before his bladder got other ideas. The welcome scent of eucalyptus filled his nostrils from the rows of sage-green gum trees lining the bank. It was the sound of the river that usually brought him peace. The monotonous babble could drown out whatever was rattling around the corners of his mind. But not today. Today's mental cacophony was too loud, even for the river. I'm sorry, but I gave you notice over 2 weeks ago, Fred. You've got to be packed and out of here by tonight, mate. His landlord's words from earlier this morning echoed in his mind. They hadn't been unkind. Fred hadn't been able to scrape together rent for months, but they'd meant business and he had nowhere to go. He'd rustled up some packing cartons, but they remained empty. How could you seal precious mementos in a box, not knowing when or if they would ever be reopened? It wasn't as though he had anywhere to store them. He was terrified that the memories would suffocate in their cardboard prison and that he would forget her. It was all too much, and his procrastinating feet had led him here. He kicked a fallen gumnut into the water, his eyes following its descent down the grassy bank. There, by the river's edge, sat a man about his own age, slumped in a wheelchair, an open bag of sliced bread at his side, now the prize of fighting seagulls. Hair the colour of aluminium foil, or aluminum foil, as you would say, waved carelessly in the breeze, with a matching neatly trimmed moustache below a substantial nose. The man's narrow face was tilted to the side, one large ear directed at the sky like a wrinkly satellite dish. His watery blue eyes, magnified behind thick round glasses, were slightly open and appeared to be squinting at something. Fred stepped closer. Hello? You all right there, mate? The lack of response alongside the stair, which was as vacant as Fred's flat would be tonight, said that he wasn't. Fred always took great joy in meeting new people, but usually they were alive.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was lovely to hear your voice reading your own book. So thank you. I have a lot of questions. I want to know a lot about your writing process and your story behind this, your first novel. But before that, can you please tell us your journey, how you became an author? Because I did read on your website about how you shifted gears in your career, but I would like to know a little bit more about if you would like to share.
Absolutely. So my father he's retired now, was a wonderful doctor. And I always thought since childhood that I would follow in his footsteps. And I worked hard and I was accepted into medical school. But when I was about halfway through, I realized that my true passion actually lay in aged care. And I was more interested in prevention rather than treatment. And so, to cut a long story short, I ended up changing degrees, doing a degree in public health, and did all of my assignments and projects in the well-being of older people. But it was when my grandfather Fred, who was also my best friend, was diagnosed with dementia, that I pivoted once again and I took a job in his nursing home so that we could spend more time together. And I worked there as the social support coordinator. And it was there that I really found my calling, but also what would be the future setting for my novel. So I had always loved creative writing, primarily in the form of writing plays. So my best friend and I, growing up, while most 5-year-olds were playing with Barbies or Legos, we would write short plays for hours and hours, and we would perform them for our very patient families. And that sort of led to a love of theatre. So I'd always loved, that sort of creative side of things, but I was working in healthcare.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, after having children, an injury prevented me from ever returning to aged care. And so I was a stay at home mum for many years. And it wasn't until the pandemic that I decided that if I was ever going to write something, now was a wonderful time. Here in Melbourne, we had one of I think, the longest lockdown in the world. We sort of had 5 months where we were only allowed to leave the house for an hour. We had the kids at home doing sort of online homeschooling. And it was then that I enrolled in a couple of online writing courses with the Australian Writers Centre, which was just a really easy and fun way to connect with other people, other aspiring authors, and to also get some professional feedback on our work. And it was there that that Frederick Fife began. And my journey to publication was an extremely lucky one. Everything happened quite fast. I can speak more about that if you want me to, or we can move on.
I would actually like to know because I was just going to ask you initially when I reached out to you to ask you if you would like to do this program. You said in short sentence that the Frederick Fife is based on your late grandfather and his
Yes.
best friend. So I was just going to ask you if you can elaborate that, and I would love to know all this story how it came to fusion. So.
Yes. So, as far as the book goes, the how the story began was with the creation of its protagonist, who was inspired by my grandfather Fred. So, to give you an example, a few years after my grandfather had died, and I was no longer working at the nursing home, I brought my baby daughter in to meet some of my former colleagues and some of the residents that were still there. And one of my grandfather's former carers pulled me aside and she said, "Oh, Anna, I really want to show you something." And taped inside her locker was a photo of my grandfather. And she said, "I keep that there. I look at it every day and he reminds me to be kind no matter what." And I sort of thought, wow, that's the kind of protagonist that I want to write about. So yeah, my grandfather was a man who had time for everyone. He listened to everyone, whether they were a waiter or an important politician. He would always take the time, and he made people feel like they really mattered. He took the time to listen to them. And so something I'm really passionate about as a positive aging advocate is writing about older people, but in a way, in something that we can all aspire to. So, there's a lot of stories out there where older characters are sort of valorized because they can still hold on to their youth. They're doing things like riding motorbikes or solving complex murders or wearing stilettos and running companies. You see a lot of these TV shows, but I wanted to find sort of this attribute that he's not a hero because he runs into a burning building or does something related to his physical ability, but that he saves people through kindness. And I think that that is something that we can all aspire to. And so, yeah, that was where it started. And also my grandmother, who, no surprise, name is Dawn, they had a love story for the ages. They truly did. Like their marriage was just something beautiful to behold. And although their names went to the characters of Fred and Dawn, their story was much more similar to that of Albert and Val, with my grandfather in the nursing home with dementia and my grandmother still well and able and visiting him in the nursing home. But so they inspired both Fred and Dawn and some of the Albert and Val story as well.
Any other characters? Because you said you worked in nursing home. Do you think that helped you to get more realistic scenario to write in your book by working there?
It definitely did. I met a whole variety of both residents and staff, and definitely took inspiration from there. The other characters are not based on any one person, but probably from a collective experience of various, people that I met, but also putting my own spin on things as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was wonderful. Just the title, The Borrowed Life of Frederick Fife. I was it, do you always this was the title, or you had to play around with it, or editors changed it?
It definitely wasn't the title. So the original title when I submitted it was called The Resident. And having worked in aged care, when I hear resident,
Mhm.
it automatically to me means someone living in a nursing home. But to the general public, a resident could be a resident of a household. And it also sounded a little bit like a thriller, like the dry, the resident. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, we played around with a lot of different names, but I couldn't be more thrilled with where we ended up. I think it fits the book so well.
Mhm. Yeah. And you can pull it apart and actually turn. Did we lose her? Oh no, we lost Sabina. Okay, I was like, somebody lost, got lost. Okay. Even we can pull the title apart and metaphorically, because multiple
Yes.
times you hear Fred said, I walked into his shoes, literally, you know.
Yes.
So when this title came, what it meant to you, what does it tell? Because now, as I said, I'm talking about pulling this title apart and metaphorically, what actually define us? Is it our relationships, our memories, or the role we play in the life of others?
Mm.
How do you see it now?
The title?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, the thing about Fred is that he is the sort of person that would return things in better condition than what he borrowed them. So at its heart, the story is about redemption, and he is able to return this life in better condition than what he borrowed it in. So that was sort of the real, the crux of it all.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, what I keep see the book is good, that, because it stays with you. Once you even close the book, it stays with you, and you keep thinking about it. And this is definitely one of those books. It's has stayed with me, and I'm still thinking about it, and everything is just like has now I've like a deeper meaning to it. So when somebody says it's a light book, I was like, okay, read and then tell me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
it's
exactly.
yeah, on surface probably it looks like it,
Mm,
but
mhm.
in my opinion, absolutely not. I think it's a very deep, has a very hidden meaning. You gotta read between the lines,
Yes.
and it's just like uh, what made me think is sometimes we say that people never change, and in that case, like even though he was kind of living somebody else's life, and people were
Mhm.
puzzled that, oh, suddenly Bernard's not grumpy anymore. He's more friendlier. But people didn't question anything else, and they were able to kind of adopt to his new personality, which was obviously Fred's. And he was able to, with that, he was able to kind of, mend old broken relationships with
Yes.
and her father, and then kind of help people connect the Lynn
Yes.
and I forgot the guy's name, sorry.
Kevin.
Kevin. So he like even he helped Val and Albert just to kind of give a dementia patient a closure that he never had of his brother giving a speech. So he, in a way, helped so touch Denise, the nurse who was struggling. He kind of helped, like you said, with his
Can
kindness,
you check
just
if it's with Buddha downstairs?
um, so he just, helped so many lives. So how do you see it? Like, do you believe in white lie, or do you just, or sometimes is it necessary to tell the truth, or kindness matter more than honesty, in your opinion?
It's that's a really tricky question. I like myself, I would say kindness and honesty. But the thing about my grandfather was he was honest to a fault. So he could not even play a card game that required cheating. He felt too guilty about it. He had no poker face at all. And that was part of the exploration, is what if you put this lovely, kind, honest man who genuinely tries to tell people the truth at the start. He's always trying to do right and to explain the mix up, but his circumstance is that he is so exhausted, he is so, full of grief, and he's practically homeless. And he can only stay there because he believes that he's not hurting anyone. He doesn't even believe that he's, stealing money from Bernard because it's sort of already taken care of. He believes at the start that Bernard has no family. So only because he sees it as a victimless crime can he stay. And then obviously, as things progress, he realizes that he's gotten himself deeper in. But then these relationships form, and he's always struggling with his guilt. Like, guilt is the real antagonist in the book in a way, as well as Denise, but it's his conscience that he continually grapples with. But all of his decisions, in the end, are all putting other people first.
Yeah, yeah. And just so the idea of the book, yeah, like you said, you knew that you wanted your main character to be kind, and it was kind of based on your grandfather, but and you wanted to be in the setting of the nursing home. So like so some characters, were they already in your head that this is how I want this character to be, or when you started writing they were evolving as you were writing? How did that process go?
I think they all evolved as I wrote. When I write, I sort of like to have some of the really main structural pillars in, sort of the really key points in the plot. But then between those points, I sort of, I don't know if you've heard the term pantser, like flying by the seat of your pants.
Mm.
I get from structural point to point by sort of just letting the writing come, letting the characters, introduce themselves and discover more about them that way, rather than having very set prescribed ideas. Fred was really the only one who I knew, because I knew my grandfather inside out. His character was sort of already at my fingertips, but the others was definitely a process of exploration.
Which one was the most difficult a character for you to write that you kind of struggled with, and which one was the fun character? They're like, oh, this is fun writing. So difficult one and a fun character that you found.
Um, like, I guess the person obviously that's least like me is Denise. And it was hard to write some of those scenes where she was mistreating residents, because, for me, that I mean, for anyone, that's just an awful thing to even think about. But the fact is that it does happen. And I've met people, you know, that are not that dissimilar, sadly. But I also had to really dig deep. I had to, you know, I interviewed people that had struggled with substance abuse and addiction, you know, alcoholism, and also people, you know, that had had really hard home lives. And so that was, yeah, something that I felt privileged to be able to represent on the page. I wanted to make Denise like the antagonist, but also that people wouldn't hate her, that at the end, you know, like Fred, you know, saying that there's no one that is irredeemable, that there's hope, you know, for everyone, even if you've done terrible things, that there's, you know, ways in which you can, you know, make changes. So yeah, she was probably the hardest. The funnest, I just adore Albert. I really adore Albert, and sometimes I still cry, even though I did what I did to him. I just, yeah, he is. There's so much of my grandfather in him as well. Just that cheekiness, the larrikin in him, and obviously Fred. Like, goes without saying, it was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
delight to write Fred.
Yes, yes, and he's a very delightful character.
Yeah.
So one thing that was stood out to me while I was reading the book, because that's something just I went through recently in my family also. After Albert's death, Val kind of emphasized the importance of discussing the deceased loved family
Yes.
members, just to honor their memory, and it's how important it is to cherish their memories rather than allowing them to fade away.
Yes.
And I don't know, is it a societal thing that excuse, or I don't know how it's hard for, or do you believe that as a society is it still a tough, hard topic? Death is a hard topic of conversation.
Absolutely. I think, you know, everyone sort of fears death, but also often just wants to put it to the back of their mind. And I think a lot of people, when they're trying to support a friend or a family member who's lost someone close to them, they often just don't know what to say. Like, they think maybe talking about them will make the person even sadder. And so they might avoid talking about them. It's certainly not a lack of good intentions, but it's often a topic that just doesn't flow naturally, especially if you don't have a lot of experience in it. So, yeah, I wanted to put that in there with Val because I think it's something that I've learned, you know, with the people I've lost, is it's actually better to talk about them, and to, you know, honor their memory and say, oh, they would have really loved this film, wouldn't they? Or things like that, rather than just pretending that they didn't exist, or like, just, you know, I think that that can help. Everyone's grief journey is totally different, but I think that is one way that that can help.
Yeah. No, and definitely I'm gonna definitely kind of opened my eyes towards that perspective,
Mm.
because it's just I feel like not talking about it under the excuse of, oh, we might hurt their feelings, or they're still grieving, we don't want to talk about that person, but I think it's quite literally opposite of it. They want to
Yeah.
talk about it, and like
Yeah.
by talking we are cherishing the memory, we are keeping them alive in their memory. By not talking, you are kind of, like you said, you're denying that they ever existed. Um,
Yeah. And in the
so,
book, you know, there's a line like that, you know, grief is love with nowhere to go. And I think by talking about the person, you're opening space for that, love to go. You're still keeping that love alive. It doesn't mean you talk about them all the time, but it's, yeah, sort of allowing and holding space for that.
yeah, no, and I thank you for that, because it definitely gave me a perspective to look at the different way and change my attitude towards how I'm gonna from now on,
Yeah.
address this. So thank you.
Mm.
Um, and when you were writing this book, like, did you, how long the process was? Like, how were your emotions? Because you actually worked there. Did you have hard time, like you said, because you don't want Denise to treat the residents in a certain way, like,
Mm.
did you have to kind of not write about certain things, or you kind of whatever you saw while you were working, you in a way you incorporated?
Yeah, I didn't really feel that anything was off limits. I wanted to really be authentic on the page. So I tried to do that as much as possible. In terms of how long it took, it's hard to say exactly because I was writing in the pandemic and sort of trying to help my children with their online homeschooling. And so, I certainly didn't sit down and write full time, but it probably, if you squished it all together, probably took at least 2 years. But then the journey to publication was incredibly fast and very unexpected. So, yeah.
That's good. I have a fun question for you. Uh, so if you get to borrow someone's life for 24 hours, who would you choose and why?
Oh, that's a really hard one. Can it be a cartoon character or?
Could be anybody. Anybody.
Oh, that's so hard to say. It's so hard to say because you could think about someone, that you would want to go into their life and try and make some changes, for the better. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe my grandfather. I would love to walk in his shoes and, you know, feel that. Yeah, just that would be a great experience.
Yeah, okay, all right. So when the project of writing a book was done and it's getting published, what did you hope that readers would take away from this book?
Uh, the number one thing is that I hoped is that that unconditional kindness of my grandfather would inspire other people to be kind. And that remains sort of my goal with the book to this day. People talk about booksellers or, sales and things like that. But I think, more than ever, the world needs kindness. And I also wanted people to, have a little bit of a glimpse into Alzheimer's as well, and to shed some light and compassion on those families that, that have a loved one with dementia.
Yeah. And I think mental illness, especially Alzheimer's, the memory loss is something where everybody around you suffers more because
Mm,
you are unaware of what's happening to you, but just your family who's watching you day in and day out,
mm,
losing your memory. I feel like that it's a caretaker's job is harder in some cases. Uh,
yeah.
so, like you said, the kindness towards everybody,
Mm,
patients also who's going through, because it's, at the same time the family goes through the same thing.
mm.
No, thank you. But another thing that I was super excited about when I went on your website is learn about your next book.
Yes.
And I'm already, I had to like put that thought aside when I was coming up with this question, because it's just, I love the title, by the way. It's very intelligent. And then I read the blurb of your thing. Can you share a little bit about it?
Yes, certainly. So it's When Lemons Give You Life. It's about a retired Michelin star chef who now lives in a nursing home, grumpy, widowed, depressed, and he actually has no desire to stay on this earth. And so he's absolutely determined that the last meal he tastes will not be the nursing home slop that they serve. And so he breaks into the nursing home kitchen to cook himself this one last perfect Michelin star quality lemon tart. And that act of cooking sort of stirs this long dormant joy within him. And he sort of begins cooking a bit more and cooking for the other residents. And so, yeah, I won't go into it into too many spoilers, but at the same time, you have his sister Lisa, who is, about 50 years old. her life is chaos. She's struggling with a new ADHD diagnosis, and she's, you know, desperately hoping to meet someone but finding it hard. And so yeah, it's about the two of them and their dynamic, but it has the same themes of, you know, redemption and family and love and food, the power of food. So I'm really excited about it. It comes out next year. The exact publication date hasn't been set for the US, but I believe it will be in fall.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm super excited. As I said, when I stumbled on your website, I saw it. I was like, oh my God, just the blurb for what you wrote, the title, everything about it. Can't wait to read it next year.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's wonderful. So before I actually open it to our patrons, if they have any questions, I was wondering, did you read anything interesting lately that you can share with our readers that stuck with you?
One book I've read recently, probably a few of you would have read The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry or seen the film.
Okay.
So there are actually two sequels to that book. And I recently read Maureen Fry and the Angel of the North. And I actually enjoyed it even more than Harold Fry because what Rachel Joyce does, Maureen, for those that have read the first book, is quite an unlikable character. You know, she's not warm and kind like Harold. But she sort of has this redemption arc, and the way Rachel Joyce writes is just so beautiful. So if you haven't read either of those books, I would recommend them. You know, Harold Fry is the first one, but then also the lesser known Maureen Fry and the Angel of the North.
Okay. Okay. Well, great. And is it true that this Water Life of Frederick Fife is turning into a movie?
Yes, so it's been optioned by Netflix, and they've written the script. There's never any guarantees. Like obviously, a lot of things are written and don't end up fully getting made. The film industry is a bit like a roller coaster, but so far so good,
Okay.
which is really exciting. So I'm yeah really excited to see where things go there. Very excited.
And obviously they'll have all the Australian actors.
No, they have actually Americanized it, but
Oh,
they've kept an element of Australia in there. But yes, normally Netflix will Americanize, you know, Hollywood eyes. But yeah, no, I'm still very excited, you know, that they'll hopefully capture the essence
yeah,
of
no.
Fred and that story.
Congratulations. That is
Thank you.
exciting. Hopefully it will come through. So because it'll be
Yes.
wonderful to see all these character come
Hmm.
to life. So now I was wondering if any of our patrons have any questions. If you want to unmute, raise your hand, type, however, if you have any questions for Anna. So, and, oh, go ahead, Sylvia. You want to unmute yourself?
Hi, Sylvia.
Oh, Sylvia, you got to unmute, okay? You're muted.
Got
Got
it.
it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, congratulations on your delightful book, Anna.
Thank you.
I have to tell you, I read a really tough book, The Elements by John Boyne. And I was a little depressed. And then I walk in the library and there's your wonderful book, specs of your wonderful book. And Pinky told me about the Zoom. So it really uplifted me. It was an uplifting kind of book, which we
Oh,
all
thank you.
need every now and then. So I thank you for that. And my
Thank
question
you.
is, who's your favorite author?
Oh, that's a really hard one. I think probably Rachel Joyce would be up there. And Frederick Backman is another favorite. Mike Gale is an excellent author as well. He's a British one, but I think his books are in the US too. So
Mm.
I would say those are my top three.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Sylvia. Um, do we have anybody else? Oh, okay, go ahead, Mrs. Sayre. Just have to unmute. Yeah.
I did enjoy your book too, Anna. It
Thank
was
you.
very delightful reading to pick up. I found it relaxing to read, and my mother was in a nursing home for a while, so I could relate to a lot of the goings on.
Mhm.
It reminded me a little bit of A Man Called Ove.
Yes.
Did you kind of model some of it after that, or?
No, I didn't. No. But yeah, people have sort of, when they're marketing a book, they sort of put it with other books, and that was one of the books mentioned, as well
Yeah.
as Remarkably Bright Creatures. So
Oh,
I
yes,
think they all sort
wonderful.
of stand in that same
Right,
genre. They all have older characters.
right.
Although Uva is only he's only 59, so he's actually quite young, like compared to Fred. But yes, there are some overlapping themes there.
Uh-huh. And how old are your children?
They are 11 and 15.
Okay.
Wow.
Have they read your book?
They have. They were some of the first readers. They were the guinea pigs.
Uh-huh, good.
They've been a wonderful support, and I'm not sure if anyone's heard it, but there's sort of this phrase that's associated with the book, which is "spread the Fred," which is kind of talking about spreading unconditional
Oh,
kindness.
sure.
And my older daughter came up with that. So when I sign books, I write "spread the Fred,"
Oh,
and
that's
then sign
wonderful.
it. So encouraging people to spread that kindness.
I love that.
That is wonderful. Your
Great.
grandfather is gonna, your uh, legacy is continued. This
Right.
kindness. Yeah, yeah, that is wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. Thank you for
Thank
being here.
you. Thank you so much
What
for
time,
having
what
me.
time is it in Australia?
It's just after 11. It's 20 to 12, so almost
Oh,
midday. Very
okay.
reasonable.
Yes,
Thank you, Mrs. Thayer.
you're welcome.
Do we have anybody else? Anybody has a comment or question? No. All right. Okay. I guess we're good. So, Anna, this was wonderful. And again, congratulations on this wonderful book and your
you.
future book. We cannot wait
Right.
to read that one. And also, good luck and congratulations on the movie deal with
Thank
Netflix.
you.
And fingers crossed, everything works out. And it sure will. And we'll be looking out for that too. So,
Thank you
thank
so much for having me, and for your support, and for anyone who's recommended the book. It means so
Mhm.
much to authors. So thank you so much.
thank you again. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, my pleasure. Have a